And it should be recording. Excellent. Super. Well, welcome everybody. Appreciate you taking the time to be with us tonight. And I said earlier on as we were just checking everything out that I really wish we weren't holding these webinars for the purpose of reopening play and restarting play. I kind of wish it was something a lot more exciting and vibrant and useful and helpful. But it is what it is. It's the situation we're in, and so I'm going to dive right in. Before we start, just a couple of ground rules is that what we're asking is that you use the Q&A button. So all questions must be submitted using the Q&A button. It's on a nav bar. It might be at the bottom of your screen or at the top of your screen. It all depends where you have it situated when we're doing the screen share function here. And we ask that you type your questions in. We will attempt to answer all the questions while we proceed through the webinar. And if we don't, we'll hit whatever we can, later on at the end. Rob Holliday will be pretty much monitoring the questions. Only the panelists, Ian, Rob, and I will see them. And that what we'll do is we'll stop at a certain point and he'll ask some questions. Some questions we may purposely hold to the end because we may end up answering it through the presentation. So just to let you know. I typically don't put this third bullet in there, but I decided to put it in tonight is let's please keep our submissions to questions because only the three of us can see it. If you've got a commentary that you would like to share, and believe me, I've heard plenty of commentary since 3:15 p.m. on Monday and I've offered my own as well, is that, this, just by posting it, nobody else is going to see it. We'll see it, and unless there's a question involved, we won't address any rants or raves that might be coming in. So we appreciate keeping this to business as much as possible. So thank you very much. All right, and let's get to there we go. So reopening Massachusetts, I just want to kind of give people a little bit of a background as to the process of how we got to, phase 1, phase 2, and now phase 3. I really didn't cover this too much in the last presentations, but I figured for this, I'd give a little bit of a background as to how we got where we are. With the reopening of Massachusetts, it was a large multitude of sector-specific task force teams. And so the task force team that provided guidance and suggestions and our ideas and our input fell under the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Excuse me. So this department was asked to give guidance and directives related to the reopening of outdoor recreational activities and businesses in the Commonwealth. So the sector, EEA, basically had to take care of all of these categories. So I've highlighted youth and adult amateur sports as one of the task force that I sat on. But if you take a look at everything else under the EEA, parks and open space, rec boating, outdoor recreational, campgrounds, outdoor recreation, general business guidance, drive-ins. They had everything pretty much having to do with what takes place outdoors. And then with regards to sports, they took a look at both indoors and outdoors. So this all fell under the EEA, and the task force that I was on, the youth and adult amateur sports, was made up of representation from girls lacrosse, boys lacrosse, softball, baseball, ice hockey, volleyball, basketball, soccer. There was several indoor facility owners, specifically mostly rinks. That's who made up this group, this working group. And we as a group made recommendations to the commissioner of EEA, who then brought that to the lieutenant governor, who then sat down with the major task force, of which then the Department of Public Health was a part of that discussion. And so as we go through, I'm just going to just make it clear that when the news came out on on July 6th, that Monday, we were shocked. You know, it was a gut punch to all of us. We did not expect to be delivered the news that we were delivered. And if you actually take a look at all of these categories, and restaurants and theater and casino and everything else, that the only void on any action last Thursday prior to July 4th was for youth sports. It was a topic that was being vehemently shared. It was pretty tense from what we understand, that our committee, our group, our representative from EEA advocated on our behalf for having games start, which is now level 3 start for all sports with this rollout. And then to be dealt the news that we got on Monday was a huge surprise to all of us. Very, very upsetting to some sports, and some, baseball, softball, they squeaked in. And so we had a long discussion on that on our Monday meeting as this was being announced. It rolled out at 3:15 p.m. And if you notice that the governor didn't even hold a press conference on that Monday when this rolled out. Not sure if it was tied in or not, or if whatever was planned. There was some minor mention of some questions asked about youth sports in yesterday's press conference that they held, the lieutenant governor. And the governor did make some remarks and comments, but they weren't pressed with the why of the various, the information will go through, the risk categories that were handed down. But what we do know is that, whoops, that's not good. Bear with me a second. Can you still see the presentation?
Yes, but it's in edit view.
Thank
Now
you.
it's back.
Thanks. Okay, great. But we do know that two driving factors behind the decision are the numbers. And from March all the way up until today, the governor, Department of Public Health, Lieutenant, been stressing the numbers. And so they make all the decisions based on the Massachusetts numbers. I will say we're, as much as we agree or disagree with the direction being taken, is that we live in a state that has the lowest infection to test rate in the country. And there's reasons for that. And the reasons are very powerful, given the numbers that we have in Massachusetts. The other numbers that come into play are definitely the economic numbers. Is that there are businesses all across the state that have shut their doors. And it's just not restaurants, it's just not theaters, it's just not small mom and pop stores, but it also includes in youth sports, there's equipment providers, there are clubs, there are certain leagues that are on basically on thin ice. There are two hockey rinks have shuttered their doors in the state. And there's a lot of the indoor facilities both turf and court and ice are all, and track are all feeling the pain, tremendously feeling the pain. I mean, to the tunes of millions and millions of dollars. But, you know, once again, the governor is all about health and safety and wellness of the citizens, and just really wants to mitigate death. And that's unfortunate that we have it, that people are dying, and that's why he's doing what he's doing and making some very, very tough and difficult decisions. Now, do we agree with all the decisions? No, we don't. Do we feel that we could have done things differently for youth sports in phase 3, step 1? Absolutely do. But it comes down to the numbers, and then the next factor, which basically is what the risk classes are based on, is the chance of respiratory particle transmission. And that's to mitigate the chance of that. These are the 2 driving factors, a whole other multitude of factors for sure, but these are the 2 driving factors as to why some of the decisions were made. So where do we stand with numbers? Well, here's one of the states that people are looking at, Arizona. The projection of new cases. This is from the official site that most states use, that the government's using. And this is based on, you know, projections. The reality, the real numbers are basically would be all over the place, because sometimes numbers are reported one day and not the next. But on this chart up to the first few days of July, those are the actuals. And then what you have here is, if easing was still to take place in Arizona, of which it is, they're looking at a slight drop, and then it would start to project dramatically upwards. If you take a look, in late May and early June, when Arizona started to ease up, they had their first little dip and then a spike. And that's really what has caused, you know, concern throughout the country. Now, the dotted green line with masks says if everybody adhered to wearing masks and social distancing, that's what the trend would start to look like. And unfortunately, with the easing, the use of masks in Arizona eased up dramatically, and that's why they're in such a precarious place. Texas. Now, of course, the numbers aren't, you know, as high as Texas here, but they did have a rise in April, mid-April, then a dip in mid-May. They started to ease up, and now they're just on a rapid climb. And you take a look at, if they continue easing, the projections are just going to go off the roof. If they started to really clamp down on masks, the numbers will go lower. Now, Texas, as a state, has started in certain states, mandate mask wearing, so they can get that dotted green line, so they can bend the curve downwards. Texas also started games. And then as of this week, the governor turned it back and went from games back to practices, no games, based on what the governor saw. So they were ahead of us, and now they're equal to us in distance practicing. They had the clock turned back. Several states haven't even entered the game situation yet, and some have. So we're just about par when it comes to the type of sports that, you know, soccer, football, lacrosse, ice hockey. We're pretty much par with a lot of states who haven't even started games yet. So we're moving. We're not the only state that's going through this, put it that way. And I've talked to the other state directors, and they're feeling the pain just like we are, believe me. So you take a look at Arizona and Texas, they're the 2 problem states, so to say, at the time, and then Massachusetts. Massachusetts, we had our huge surge end of March into the first few weeks of April. And yes, the majority of that surge, unfortunately, happened to be in senior facilities, nursing homes, extended care facilities, acute care facilities, and the such. And it's a sin, it's a shame, and our heart bleeds for everybody who was lost family or friends, believe me. And then all of a sudden, the governor really started to clamp down, and we are in an incredible position as we enter July, better than any other state out there. But the projections that they're looking at on the easing really have them concerned. That if we start to ease up and we start to let it get away from us, as compared to Arizona and as compared to Texas, we start to hit our flu season, our typical flu season in October. And so that's why you almost see that just jump up. If we were to continue, and are to continue, I should say, the wearing of masks, practicing social distancing, keeping our distance in as many activities as possible, that dotted green line below for masks shows us as we enter September to be in an incredible position of strength when it comes to new cases in our state. So when I was talking about numbers and mitigation of spread of particles, here's the numbers part. So let's move into where the threat of the spread of respiratory particles comes into play. Rob, any questions up to now that I should jump on, or can I keep going?
Yeah, one from Dean Seidel. Why do we think that soccer is listed as a high-risk sport? Why does the task force keep getting surprised by the results?
Okay, let me get to that at the end of this slide. Okay, just remind me for sure. Okay, thanks. So risk categories: low risk. Low risk are sports or activities that can be done with social distancing and/or individually. Low risk. Tennis, swimming, playing catch, disc golf, hiking, biking, hunting, and so on. These are some of the examples provided. Social distancing. To the Department of Public Health in the state of Massachusetts, it's all about masks and social distancing. I mean, if anybody watched yesterday's press conference, which a lot of us did, because we're always waiting to see what the governor has to say about youth sports, when the Secretary of Department of Public Health got on, and the first thing she said was she looked out at the crowd and said, well, I'm glad to see everybody wearing their mask and social distancing, and turned to the governor and just said, sorry, Gov, but I had to get that in. That's how important this is to our Secretary of the Department of Public Health. And I will tell you this much, whether you like it or not, she and the governor have done a phenomenal job getting our state to be where it is with the numbers that we have. So you can be disgusted with all of this, but at least we have something that positive taking place in the state of Massachusetts. So the next category is moderate risk. Sports or activities that involve intermittent contact, but with protective equipment or mitigating measures in place that may reduce the likelihood of respiratory particle transmission between participants, either by wearing masks or by modifying play. So if you notice all of these sports here that are listed, contact is not permitted. Now, yes, you might say baseball and softball, you're using your glove to tag somebody out, but what you're going to possibly see definitely in softball, the use of the double base, that they use so you're not tagging a player. Track and field, they're recommending in their track and field guidelines that they use every other lane in track and field. But some of these do have us, questioning a little bit of why field hockey, volleyball, and no contact lacrosse, and what makes it different than soccer. And so some of the discussions that were had was because contact is not permitted in those sports, that the players are going to be always at a distance from each other. There's no reason for two players to get close to each other. Field hockey, stick to stick, still can have 3 feet apart. Volleyball, you have players going up to protect a spike. They could be very close, but it's for a very short period of time. It's not constant and so forth. And no contact lacrosse, to the best of our knowledge, and I was just on the phone with our lacrosse folks, is that the best of our knowledge, they put in no contact lacrosse because that is girls or women's lacrosse. It is classified as no contact. Now, we all know contact takes place, but it's not supposed to. And that's why they put in there intermittent contact, which if it were to take place in any of these sports, besides baseball, softball, except for, something that's not permitted, it's a foul. You blow the whistle, you stop play, the players move apart, and you move on. So that's some of the reasoning by giving them the moderate risk category. Let's go on to higher risk. These are sports that involve close, and they say sustained contact between participants. A lack of significant protective barriers and the high probability that respiratory particles will be transmitted between participants. Some of these are extremely understandable, and some we have some questions about. But you have football, wrestling, soccer, rugby, basketball, lacrosse, ice hockey, competitive cheer, cruise sailing, 3 or more, ultimate frisbee, because contact and proximity are huge factors in these sports. Thus, they're saying they involve close, sustained contact between participants. And so some of the questions that we brought up in getting to Dean's questions, what makes some of these different than others? Well, soccer, contact is permitted. You can have shoulder-to-shoulder contact in soccer. In addition to that, we're trying to find out, folks. Our committee has put a request in to the Department of Public Health to meet with them to understand the why of each one of these categories. Some are self-evident. Some we have some questions about. But why, is soccer where it is? Because one would say shoulder-to-shoulder contact between two players on the field is intermittent. Some of the preliminary information we got was, well, it's the fact that you'll have, it's allowable. Contact is allowable. And then they take a look at going up for heading. They take a look at jostling for position on set pieces. So these are a lot of, different things that they took a look at with regards to soccer. The same thing with lacrosse. Lacrosse, you can use your stick, of course, against the stick. You can poke check with the stick. It's allowable. But you also, bodily contact is a part of the game. And ice hockey and lacrosse, even though even you can have no check ice hockey, but typically in the younger ages where you have no check, the children, they're saying, can't control their ability at the mites and the peewees in those ages not to bump into other players and get close to other players where the older kids can. In addition, the majority of all cage masks or helmets that are worn in hockey don't have a shield, and they're not fitted for a shield. You take a look at professional play, it's either a cage or it's or a shield, or if it's a combo, it's an eye shield that doesn't cover the mouth. So, but once again, we're waiting to find out as much information as possible as to the why. So I'll get on to a couple of things of what we can possibly do to address what's taking place a little bit later. But there's the risk categories. Before I move on to the levels, Rob, any questions that pertain here?
Yes, question from Joanna. Why has Massachusetts classified soccer as high risk while other local states have classified it as moderate risk?
As the governor said in his speech yesterday, every state is treating everything differently. Department of Public Health and the state has their classifications, and to them, their measurement is it really comes down to the respiratory particulate spread and transmission. That's theirs. Other states have used contact as a part of their classification. So when you look at contact classifications, you have collision, which is football and rugby. Then you have contact, which is ice hockey and soccer. Then you get moderate contact, which could be basketball, because contact really isn't permitted, but it's the proximity of play, and then so forth. So Massachusetts has decided to use this as their scale, and it's unfortunately not comparable to what other states have done.
Several questions regarding the use of masks and modified rules for soccer as well.
Okay, we'll get to those later on. Okay, great. I see some people are raising their hand, and we're not going to be using that function tonight. So if you have something to ask, please type it into the Q&A. Thank you. So the types of play. Level 1. It's individual or socially distanced group activities, no contact workouts, aerobic conditioning, individual skill work and drills. Essentially, level 1 is identical to what phase 2 was for all sports. So that's what level 1 play is. Level 2, competitive practices, intra-team games, group games, contact, drills, and scrimmages. So competitive is basically considered gaming. There's a full description. You know, if you haven't looked at the document that came out from the state, it is there for you to on our website. We have a link to it, and there's a full description of what competitive means. It's multiple participants or two teams competing against one another in a single contest. That's level 2. But level 2 is inter-squad. So if you have a club, only 2 teams within that club can play each other. A town program, only teams in that town program can play each other. You can't go outside your boundaries. So that's level 2. Level 3 is competitions. It's games, and it can be inter-team meets, matches, and such. So that would be league play. That would be a friendlies between 2 towns or 2 clubs. That would be a pre-scheduled festival, not a tournament. So that's level 3 competitions. And then level 4 is tournaments, and it's outdoor only. And right now the word is, when it comes to tournaments, we may not be looking at tournaments in phase 3 at all. There is a strong, our committee is still together, and we're still trying to advocate for certain things to take place. And so there's a strong push to, at least if it's tournaments, let it be Massachusetts-based club and team tournaments only, rather than tournaments that are open to all other states. And believe me, we're befuddled by a lot of this, because we have a lot of teams in all different sports that are just going north and south over the border to play games in other states, in tournaments. And we keep thinking to ourselves, that's even worse than having them play games here in our state, because they're leaving. Who knows who they're coming into contact with? Tracing is going to be difficult at best, and then they're going to come back. So there's a lot of things that are up for discussion, a lot of things that we're aware of, and things that we're pressuring. So there's the types of play. Rob, any other questions up to this point?
Yeah, question from Linnea. Can you clarify regarding intra-team scrimmages? Does that mean 2 teams from the same town, or does it mean splitting your team of 16 in half and having them scrimmage?
So if it's a town program and you have 2 U14 teams, even though it says intra-team and then intra-group, you could have those two U14 teams or those two grade 7A teams play each other. Okay, because it's intra-group. It's the same club, it's the same town program. Yes. But they cannot play outside the boundaries of either the town program or the club that they belong to.
Follow-up question from John Brown. So this would mean for Massachusetts, in town and travel, maybe classed in different risk categories based on the types of play.
Not at all. Soccer is soccer in the eyes of the state.
But a second grade, for example, if a town had 6 second grade teams, they would be able to play under level 2 type competition, but their travel teams may not be able to travel.
Correct. That is correct. Yes. So, and we're getting ahead of ourselves, folks. We're only in level 1. Okay. When we get to level 2, we'll have another one of these webinars talking about this with everybody out there. But we're only in level 1. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. If you notice what they did with the moderate risks, is that they rolled them right into level 1, level 2, and level 3. So they included all 3 levels from the get-go. Okay. So one of the things you have to remember for baseball that's in level 3 or softball in level 3 and so forth, or non-contact lacrosse, they're allowed to have competitive practice or competitions, but when it comes to practicing, they still have to maintain social distancing. So they could, the crazy thing is they could have a social distance practice, but at the end of the practice, they could have a scrimmage by which, social distancing is not required. What the state's trying to do is maintain social distancing as much as possible. When I go back to all those groups that were listed under EEA, and I went to the guidelines of every single one of those, and the consistent message across the board, and the consistent message on what we got for you sports is social distancing. That's the consistent message across the board. So when they didn't come out with anything on Thursday of last week and then dropped this bomb on us on Monday, I wasn't surprised. Upset? Yes. Surprised? No. Because first off, you don't delay good news. And secondly, I started over the weekend reading through everything that came out to see, okay, what's it going to look like? And social distancing is the common thread through everything. And so getting back to what the governor and the Department of Public Health consistently say, wear a mask, social distance, wash your hands. So that's the consistent message that we're receiving. Anything else before I jump? All right. So let's keep our eye on the target, folks. Keep our eye on the target. And what is the target? The target is not to happen what happened in Texas. The target is not to move forward, then to have the state say, "Oh, you're going backwards." We can't afford that at all. To me, the target is coming down to, and I know people aren't going to like this, the people who have clubs out there, the people who run leagues out there, the people who own facilities out there, I know they're not going to like this, but it's short-term pain for long-term gain. Now, soccer's different than other sports because our competitive season is not during the summertime. A lot of people take the summer off. We canceled District Select program. The announcement's going to be coming out, but we're going to come out with a lot of training to replace it. But to us, the target is September 1. That's the target. The target is, first off, if we can get to step 2 in this phase, if we can get there and get to level 2 or 3, especially 3, that's the target. So we have a lot of people out there that I know are extremely upset about not being able to conduct game-like activities or game activities during the month of July. But, you know, the Department of Public Health is taking a position, and this is what we're in. We're in phase 3, step 1, level 1, safe and healthy environment to practice. That's what July is going to look like. The word we've gotten is that we will be in this phase for a minimum of 3 weeks. Takes us up to the last week of July. If we're able to get something out sooner because the numbers look great, because our friends in these low and moderate risk sports are doing a great job on following the guidelines, then we may get something sooner. But I would say plan on late July for when we're going to start to approach step 2. The target that we have, that we're advocating for, that we're trying to move forward on, is in August and September at the latest. Preferably, when step 2 starts in phase 3, that we get levels 1, 2, and 3, a safe and a healthy environment for practices and intra-league games. Once again, some people are raising their hands. If they can use the Q&A, that would be appreciated. We have a couple hundred people on, and so we're not going to open up mics. So that is, what we are trying to position ourselves to have phase 3, step 2, levels 1, 2, and 3 for soccer. It's very well that the governor and DPH may come out with something different for soccer and for basketball and for lacrosse and for football. And if we can end up in a better position, then we're going to do everything possible to try and do that. The tough part is, if it's soccer the way it's played today, that could be a challenge. So we are working on coming up with ideas for a modified version of the game. We started working on that on Monday, and with the second we heard this, and we're working on plans for what we may be considered a moderate risk version. Spring of 2021, that's the target for phase 4, levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, safe and healthy environment for tournaments. If we're able to have tournaments sooner that are state domiciled only, then great, we'll do that. We'll take that. But the tournaments are integral part. Tournaments are very, very important to everybody that belongs to Mass Youth Soccer. Why? It's one of the major revenue drivers for our complex. The Labor Day tournament, the Memorial Day tournament, Thanksgiving, the March, the preseason, the postseason, the showcases. We have lacrosse out there. We have field hockey out there. That's a very important part of the Mass Youth Soccer complex. And so, believe me, we're fighting as much as we can for everything that we can get. Rob, any questions up to this point that involve the topics?
Yeah, we've had one from Matt Catania. Mass Youth Hockey Association is organizing a petition towards the governor with the aim of getting something changed in the next 2 weeks. Is Mass Youth Soccer considering something similar? So there are a couple of folks out there who have already started a petition run. It's started by some leagues and by some facility owners. The Mass Youth Hockey is taking that stance. We're asking everybody, and I was going to bring it up later, I'll bring it up now. Everybody, please contact your state representatives. Petitions are great. Contact your state representatives, and all that we ask is for them to have the Department of Public Health meet with the leaders of the sport organizations to sit down and discuss what we can do for step 2. That's what we would like you all to do. I'll say it again at the end, but that's what we would like. We've already had a couple people doing it. I will share this. What doesn't help
is that we have had a few people write some emails and put together some missives and rants, for lack of a better term. And those have ended up at the State House. And then I get some phone calls saying, don't you have any control over your members? So let's keep it civil. Let's keep it healthy. Let's keep it meaningful. But if we go into a Dennis Miller rant, folks, it's not going to help. Any other questions?
Question from Jamie, which I can reply to directly, is can you add the info on who to contact and request? We'll send a communication to all organization leaders, similar to how we did with Triple-E when we were looking for support for that measure, with who to contact and what should be in the communication. So you should get that email tomorrow if you're a leader of a Mass Youth Soccer affiliated organization.
Great, and then get it out to all your members. That's the best method to take, okay? Hundreds of thousands of emails hitting our state reps is better than one long piece of paper with a lot of names on it. So, thank you.
One from Hugo, whilst we're on this slide. Can you confirm the timelines of when it could be possible to play games between towns or clubs? He's put here, it seems like aggressively it would only be mid-September.
Hugo, if I could tell you that, one of the casinos open today, I'd be down there playing. Based on what we saw at the end of phase 2, which was not what we recommended, and based on what we saw when phase 3, step 1 came out, which was not what we recommended, I have virtually given up trying to guess what's going to come out of the Department of Public Health. Now, I'm saying that, you know, with a matter of some disgust, but on the flip side, they've done an incredible job getting us to where we are. So that's why I'm saying short-term pain for long-term gain. So, you know, it may be our step 2 is levels 1 and 2. And believe me, the governor can always come out and include a step 3 in there if he wants. He did that with restaurants. There were some, you know, mid-phase modifications that were made. So again, that's, you know, that is some bearing on what's taking place. Now, there is one thing, I've been talking to quite a few people, and I appreciate everybody's dialogue for sure, is that we saw that a lot of colleges aren't playing a fall season. The Ivies just announced that they're not playing a fall season. Several of the NESCAC colleges have announced they're not playing fall. UMass Boston has announced. Do not link those decisions to intrastate youth sports. They have students coming from all over the world to these colleges. And from a tracing process, that's a nightmare. And so the reason why these institutions are making these decisions is because they don't have the kind of control that youth sports does, where you have a set team with the one coach around or two coaches playing with each other for you know, and providing pretty succinct traceability. The colleges don't. The MIAA is they've been brainstorming ideas. You know, they're trying to do everything possible to have a fall season. They're thinking outside the box, which is exciting to see. They're coming up with different ideas. I know that they're going to have some, you know, some ideas coming out towards the end of the month, because they need to get, you know, schools need to have a plan in place when it comes to athletics. So the Department of Public Health is looking at what's taking place at MIAA. So, you know, there's funky things taking place, such as possibly considering moving baseball from the spring to the fall, and soccer and football to the spring, and so forth. You know, there's a lot of concern in high school because you have three sport athletes who would have to give up a certain sport, and it could be linked to scholarship opportunities and all that stuff. but they're trying to figure things out. They're really trying to figure things out. So we are really, really hoping that in August, we're at least at level 2 with games, so that we can demonstrate that we can play games in a safe and healthy manner to earn to earn level 3. That's what our plan is. Anything else, Rob?
Yes, connection to MIAA. I've had a couple of questions. Are high school and youth sports expected to be clumped together?
No, they're being viewed differently, because if you notice in the reopening Massachusetts, or if you really start to dig into it, the MIAA and youth and high school sports falls under the Department of Education, and so they are making separate decisions from the reopening Massachusetts task force. That's not related. So youth sports and MIA are not related in this decision process, but they are sharing data.
Thank you. A question regarding captains practices. Lots of high schools have summer practices with lack of supervision, for want of a better term. How is Mass Youth Soccer addressing them?
Well, a couple things is that Mass Youth Soccer only sanctions one high school summer league. That's the French River League, at which then their season was canceled. They're sanctioned. All the players register with Mass Youth Soccer, and it's all the coaches that are adult registered with Mass Youth Soccer in the French River League. The dozen or so other leagues around the state are on their own. They always have been. They're many of them are what we call a naked league, and by naked, they're not covered by any insurance. Now there are 2 or 3 that have gotten insurance programs, that they have put into place to insure the players, for liability and the such. But they're not affiliated with Mass Youth Soccer, and we have no ability to sanction them or to basically control them. However, the state does, and the Department of Health in every town does. That play is not permissible. It's soccer. Just because it's not put together by Mass Youth Soccer, U.S. Club Soccer, ASO Soccer, SAY Soccer, USSSA Soccer, Canadian Soccer, doesn't mean that it's exempt from Phase 3, Step 1, Level 1 guidelines. So a town can definitely go in, and or the police go in and they shut it down. All right. So Phase 3, Step 1 for soccer. Right now, it's individual or socially distanced group activities. I went through that. So what's different from Phase 2? I'm going to point out the major differences. Phase 2 was groups of 12 as a cohort, as a group. Could be 11 players and 1 coach, 10 players and 2 coaches, in a confined space, socially distancing for practices. Phase 2 is no more than 25 players or participants, and the reason the participant would be the coaches, can be on a single playing surface area court at any one time. So before I go on, is if it's a team that typically plays 7v7, that's their playing surface. So if you have 13 or 14 or 15 kids on a roster and a coach, you can have a full team practice with the coaches that play 7v7. So you could actually have 4 7v7 fields to a pitch, and Ian will touch on that shortly. If they typically play 9v9, that age group typically plays 9v9. You can have 2 9v9 fields, going touch to touch, and you can have up to 25 players on those 9v9s, playing 9v9 on those fields. The number of coaches and staff should be limited. Large playing areas and surfaces such as athletic fields, turf tracks, facilities that have multiple courts or playing areas may be used by more than one group at one time. So a field cut into 4 is 4 7v7s. you're fine. As long as there's social distancing and as long as between those 77s, they're 20 feet apart. So let me go to the next slide. I think this is where Ian jumps in.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. I just want to say a few things before I get into what you're looking at here on the screen. First off, a question from Fawad about does soccer have a seat at the table with the governor? I would suggest that no sport has a seat directly at the table with the governor, but soccer certainly has a voice with the governor, and Mike would be our representative in terms of being that voice. And don't misunderstand, he's a very powerful voice and advocate to get this thing back out moving. Second thing I think we need to consider, will we take this slower, more progressive approach in favor of having a guaranteed fall season, providing that the numbers obviously go in the right direction? Might be something that I would ask that we consider. So we've provided all of the necessary tools for you guys to be successful if you want to run any type of training sessions currently under the current guidelines where physical and social distancing is still being applied. I won't use the term enforce because I've seen a lot of questions regarding that. How are we going to police this? How are we going to police that? Ultimately, those people will be found out on their own accord, because our numbers will tend to go in the wrong direction if they haven't behaved themselves. So it's just different things to consider. I want to live in a world where people operate under the honor system, abide by the rules that are set forth, even as Mike has acutely attested to. We may not always like them or agree with them, but those are the cards we've been dealt, and we just have to figure out the best way to deal with them. For you, Tom Scott, there you go. I've actually mentioned your name live. In terms of coach education, we have a barrage of blended soccer coaching courses that we are offering. And by blended, what I mean there is you can take an online classroom piece of the course at home. And if you want us to come into Quincy, unfortunately, we have no jurisdiction there, but knowing you and your powers, if you can find us a field and we'll find enough people that are interested to take the course, we will come down to Quincy, and for 2 hours, we will run the field session that goes hand in hand with the 2-hour virtual classroom session that we can provide for you through US Soccer Coaching courses. What I can tell you is currently, and this diagram that we're looking at now, as I'm coming full circle back to the diagram, this diagram doesn't adequately display it. And the reason that it doesn't display it is this. We've currently got a coaching education course going on right now at our fields in Lancaster. We've got about 15 or 16 coaches there at the field. We've designed what we think, keywords, we've designed what we think can be a very effective way of teaching your team to build out of the back while executing social distancing, keeping social distancing with the players. Now, it's a group of adults that's going to be on the field, so I imagine it's going to look more akin to walking soccer than actual children running at full speed soccer. However, if we can make this work through coaching education, so there's another plug for you to get involved with our blended coaching education course. If we can make this work with our coaching education, I definitely am, and we're going to push our guys and myself included, and we're going to create socially distanced session plans where we can work in different areas of the field, such as building out the back, playing through the midfield, getting into the attacking third, all with social distancing involved. But first, we need to be certain that this is going to work and create the safe environment that is going to enable the numbers to go in the right direction. So what we're looking at here on the diagram is a full 11 versus 11 field, and it's split into 4 quadrants. If you want to look at it this way, I have no problem with this. Think of this as a circuit training or a stations type training session. We could say that the half of the field on the left is an entire team out to train. You've got the coach in the top field who is working on some ball manipulation with their midfield and defenders. and you've got the assistant coach working in the bottom half of the field with some physical preparation for a defending unit. It doesn't have to be that way, but it's just as an example of how you can now devise a whole field setup to incorporate an entire team. On the other side of the field, you've got some passing patterns going on, and then in the top half of the field, you've got some socially distanced shooting games that the coach is overseeing there. So just different ways that you could slice this field up and make sure that the players are getting what they need throughout a soccer training session while remaining socially distanced. So I said a lot in a short space of time, but that's the best I could do with the time you gave me. Always available for a chat. Back to you, Mike.
Thank you, Ian. I recommend everybody goes to our website. Under coaching, we have social distance coaching plans, and they're turnkey, ready for you to start any activities that you would like to start this summer if you're holding any clinics or any type of training that's going to be taking place. All the resources are there for you on the website. So what else is different from phase 2? I'm getting questions, and I want to make sure that I clear this. Yeah, what's with the 100 people rule? In the document that came out, it states that you have to have a limit of up to 100 people, including participants, players, coaches, volunteers, spectators, in the aggregate, in or on surrounding playing surface. Folks, that's only for competitions, which is level 2, level 3, and eventually level 4. So there isn't that 100 people restriction, because if you're going to have 4 teams of 15 playing on 77 practices and then all their parents, you could be over 100 people, and that's fine. As long as everybody outside the playing surface and on is socially distanced, it's fine. The 100 people rule has to do with games. They just don't want the games and tournaments to become overly crowded.
Mike, while we're on numbers, clarify a couple of things for our viewers.
Sure.
Does the 25 include coaches?
Yes, it's 20, yeah, players and participants. So you could have 1 coach and 24, 2 coaches and 23. That's correct.
And another question, so based on the guidance, you could have only 1 group of U15s, but 4 groups of U10s who play 77?
So if you have a group of U15s out there and then you've got 3 groups that typically play 77, that U15 has to be on a full-size field. They cannot go to 99 or 77. They have to be on a full-size field. Or something equivalent, but they can't take a quarter of the field, because that is not what's regular or normal for that age group. All right. So what else is different? Here's one that has us referees all excited, and coaches, by the way. This is something different. Before, coaches could take off their mask when they got down to the field so they can communicate as long as they were 6 feet away. Our suggestion was to, I should demonstrate here, our suggestion was to, if you had to yell, okay, Billy, go over there, and then you put it back on. Well, now it has to be on at all times. Okay? Must be face coverings worn at all times, maintaining social distancing. So practice communicating through a mask in your backyard or something along those lines. Well, we're not at games yet, but I've seen some video of some baseball games that took place yesterday and the day before, and the umpires should be wearing face masks. If they weren't, they're violating the protocols. So then it comes down to referees. If by the time we get to step 2, this may or may not be still in phase 3. We're not sure. I would venture to say it's going to stick around for a while. So what other states have already moved to, and we're most likely moving that direction, when we do get the games, Referees will need to wear a mask, and then they'll be using electronic whistles. Electronic whistles run about $13 to $15. If you haven't bought one yet, buy one now. Fox 40 makes them, other companies make them. And so we actually purchased a large supply for us to give referees who were going to be doing our districts, if we were able to play districts this summer. Unfortunately not, but so that's something else that's different from phase 2. Coaches, but referees and umpires were not mentioned in phase 2. So I'm going to wrap up with a few things, and then we'll get to as many questions as we can. Is first off, Master Soccer's website page, return to soccer activities. Go to the Master Soccer website. I don't have to pull the screen up. Go to the website, go to MA Safe Soccer, go to return to soccer activities, and all of this information is there. The guidelines are there, okay? It's imperative that we follow the guidelines as required by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I'm starting to use the word the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, because if I just put in here that we follow the guidelines as required by Massachusetts, people think that's Mass Soccer. Folks, now this is the higher authority, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Make sure that you have identified your COVID safety officer. The link for doing that and having them complete the form is on the Return to Soccer Activities webpage. Just scroll down, make sure every organization has a COVID safety officer. We do have some clubs that are not affiliated with Mass Youth Soccer listening in tonight, and we really appreciate you being with us. I highly advise that you take on this same type of a role where you have a COVID officer, because that's the go-to person for everything COVID. You want to have one go-to person who understands everything, is in communication with us at the state, communication with the Commonwealth, so that there's not mixed messages or mixed interpretations. That's very important. Each team should have a COVID coordinator, preferably not the coach. Could be an assistant coach, or it could be a parent. If it is a parent, they have to be registered, background checked, safe sport checked, the whole bit. But have the coach identify somebody who can help them be the COVID coordinator. What's their job? Keeping the parents 6 feet apart when on the sidelines, making sure that social distancing is taking place. You notice tonight, we didn't go through all of the guidelines again from like we did last time. The majority of the guidelines are identical to phase 2. Wearing a mask to and from, separation of time so a coach has time to clean up and sanitize, use of sanitizer, on and on and on. That's where you get help from your COVID coordinator for each team. And then all coaches, volunteers, employees must read and understand and practice the guideline requirements. It's been even suggested that you may want to consider having these folks sign off that they've done this. Why? Because it may come to it just the way concussion training is required, because it helps us with our insurance companies. Insurance companies are going to say, how do you really know if your folks have read this stuff? How do you know your coach understands the guidelines? How are you aware of that? And so it may get to a point where they have to sign off on this. And this may be coming down the road from the insurance side of things. And then lastly, we've got 220 some odd people on tonight, 223. This is fantastic. This is a group effort that requires collective focus. We appreciate everybody who has helped us through phase 2. We know this is a kick in the gut or other parts for phase 3, especially for the clubs that are both members and not members of Mass Youth Soccer. That this could be devastating, and we feel for you, and believe me, we're advocating, we're fighting. Some of the other questions come up about, well, Mike, people are going up north, and is the state aware of that? Believe me, they're aware of it. Everybody on our task force, we've just turned from a task force into a pack, for lack of a better term, to try and advocate for our sports getting out of this higher risk category. Some of the things we're taking a look at possibly is to create a no-contact soccer. Now, it's a stopgap. That's all it is. But at least if we can get kids playing games. The reason why no-contact lacrosse is in there, because there is actually a no-contact lacrosse play. It's girls lacrosse or women's lacrosse. Also, there's a form called intercross, which is specifically no contact for safety reasons. There's no such thing known as no contact soccer. So can we come up with a version that's a stopgap so that will help us possibly get moving forward? There's pluses and minuses. The plus is hopefully we can start step 2 with some form of games, league games, that no slide tackling, no shoulder to shoulder, no heading, no throw-ins, so it's basically like, indoor where you put the ball down and kick it back to a free pass back to defense to restart. Ball has to be kept shoulder length or lower. I mean, there's a lot of creative things that we can do and we can suggest, and we are doing this. We're going to bring this to the state to say, help us out here. The flip side is the state says, wow, this is great, this is neat, this is the way soccer will be played in Massachusetts for the next 10 years. You don't want to take that risk. So there's a delicate balance of what we bring forward and what we suggest. Delicate balance, but we are working on this. We want to get kids playing games safely and as healthy as possible, as quickly as possible. Believe me, we're pushing forward. We're pushing forward. Other questions?
Mike, can you describe the role of the COVID safety officer?
So the COVID safety, real easy. Go to our website. No, it's on the website under under our return to soccer activities. I actually have it. Bear with me a second. Queued up. So right here on our website, return to soccer activities, if you scroll down, first off, here's our guidelines updated for phase 3, announcement about the webinar, our checklists, which have been updated. And then right here, the COVID safety officer, responsible for communicating policies organization-wide to coaching staff, administrators, parents, and players. And here's the form that you would click on. Here's a click through to, if you've identified that person, to get them into our database so that we can start doing our communications with those folks. And then here's, by the way, the coaching toolkit that was put together by the technical department with physical distancing session plans. We've got everything ready for you. You don't have to recreate the wheel. Now, right now they're based on 12. Is it, Ian? 12 per? And we're going to basically modify those to go up to team size.
Yeah, full team. Yeah.
Now, by the way, even though you can have 25 in an area, don't try and squeeze in 2 teams of 12 because it's all about tracing. All about tracing. Try and keep it to team-centric. Don't try and overload the system because then if that hurts the numbers, we all hurt. And then actually, we did update our guidelines. If you take a look here, updated for July 6th, phase 3, step 1. And so that is what you get when you click on our guidelines right here. What else, Rob?
Yes, there's plenty. As we move towards the full season, any suggestions for what organizations should be looking for PPE, sanitizer, wipes, masks? Are organizations going to be responsible for these?
Yeah. So all of the information about the required PPE is in the guidelines. The basics are that's masks. Then the next one is hand sanitizer, gloves, and wipes, Clorox wipes or spray, a germ-killing spray with paper towel if you can't get the wipes. Those are the basics. And organizations and or coaches are, that's a part of what would be, it's part of the I hate this, the new way. I'm not going to say new norm. I said it, but the new way that we have to deal with this until we get in the clear. So what Mass Youth Soccer is, we just are about to pick up our first shipment. We will be getting to all of our member organizations an initial supply of a 4-ounce thing of sanitizer. It's pretty much one per team, given the registration numbers we got from you last fall. And we'll be delivering those to one person per league, a contact per league, who then can disseminate it from there.
More questions regarding the COVID safety officer. Is there a list the COVID safety officer can go by to make sure everything's covered? And does the COVID safety officer just need to submit the form, or are there any other notifications we require?
So the form is all that the COVID safety officer needs to complete. And then it's the checklist that we provide just up above here, member checklist, which is what they would use to help make sure that they're communicating policies. They make sure their coaches are aware of the checklist, the parents are aware of the parent checklist, and there's a player checklist. So those are the tools that they need to make sure that the members of their organization are aware of. And it's not a lot of heavy lifting. It's just making sure the word is getting out there and nobody drops the ball.
All righty, I got some questions for Ian. Ian, another question from Tom Scott. Are we allowed to offer goalkeeper training now?
Yes, we do feel as though the goalkeeper is an important part. I know we discouraged it because we thought we were going to be in a shorter version of phase 2. In fact, we are. We're in phase 3, step 1. So what we're suggesting now is that the goalkeeper should always wear gloves. You don't have to re-sanitize the gloves after every save, but I would say that every time there's a break in action for a drink of water, whatever, go ahead, wipe down the gloves. And by all means, keep a close eye on these young goalkeepers when they start to, get a bit warm out there, because we don't want that to happen. So it's that's going to be a tricky one for you to manage and monitor, but goalkeepers, yes, please go ahead and use them. Make sure they wear gloves. Make sure you clean the gloves periodically throughout the practice.
Especially the older keepers, more one than the other, likes to spit in their gloves to get them tacky. Those days are over.
I hope so.
Are we going to be releasing some guidelines regarding tryouts?
Is that a question for me?
I hope so.
Oh yeah. Well, we've got guidelines regarding tryouts. I mean, I'm going to stand by what I said the first time. If you are confident in your own ability at identifying players while maintaining social distancing, please feel free, go ahead and run your tryout. But don't be surprised at what you get at the end if it's not what you thought you got at the beginning. I think that really, if anything, what this points to is we maybe need to revisit this whole tryout thing, which is a much longer conversation than we can possibly hold right now. I would be happy to be part of those conversations with anybody that's willing to have the conversation, but I think this is a bit of a wake-up call for us to reassess and reevaluate what a tryout's all about anyway, and why do we have them? And I know there's lots of answers, but I'm going to stand by what I said in the first phase 2 webinar, and that is I wouldn't encourage them while they cannot compete in a way that you normally would in soccer. I hate to tell you that, but it's just the truth.
Some questions regarding the physical distance training session plans. Are you going to have any more of them? People have found them very helpful. And are we going to be providing any for pre-K or kinder through 2nd grade players who can tend to swarm?
Yeah, I'm going to suggest that probably is our most scariest age group of all the age groups that's difficult to control. If you ever coach players 6 years old and under, well, that might be the the eternal herding of cats right there. Not to say that children are cats, by the way. I don't want you to misinterpret me there, but you get the idea. In terms of creating other training session plans, as I said during my brief blurb in the webinar, that's our intent. But first, we want to make sure that they work. We've got ideas. We've always got ideas about putting training sessions together. Now we just need to make sure they work. The best environment, the most controlled environment for us to try these out is in our coaching education courses. So I encourage you to get involved with our coaching education. If you haven't been through a grassroots coaching education course and you have any type of coach education other than grassroots, get involved, come and take a look at what's going on in coaching education, specifically with our physical distancing for building out of the back currently. Eventually, we're going to be building in the opponent's half and trying to score goals. But we want to test it to make sure it works so it's safe before we release it. We just feel as that really, really key.
Question from Thomas Callahan. Is there a link on Mass Youth Soccer that will provide updated guidelines that we can reference for parents? Yes, we've provided a 301 redirect so that link will always direct to the most recent version of our guidance as well. Question for you, I would say, Mike, are there going to be any new referee trainings?
So we've been in close contact with the MSRC, and as we approach the ability for games to be played, what we plan to have is some additional training. It may be some pre-recorded video clips that are going to be accessible on massref.net or even on our website as well. And we're talking to them about holding similar webinars to what we're holding now for the referee community.
Thank you. Question from Brendan. Does the state have recommendations on best way to seek approval with local boards of health to receive permits for socially distanced summer programming? This would be for clinics, not camps. For clinics.
So what we've seen that's been working in some other communities is that to print out the guidelines, print out the checklists, print out the information we have on our website, print it out in color, 3-hole punch it, put it in a binder, and go in to see your departments of public health. And they'll be extremely impressed. That's the feedback that we've gotten. Some towns who have done that have gone in and they've gotten permits where some of the other sports are twiddling their thumbs because they just went in with asking for permission. So that's the best approach to take, to let them know how far ahead of the game Mass Youth Soccer is on health and safety.
Yeah, if I could piggyback onto that for you, Brendan, and this has definitely been a part of, it's going to be a part if it's not already, but it certainly is a part of our push to get soccer recognized as maybe not such a high-risk sport. I was fortunate enough to be able to get a hold of a document that was produced by the Dutch Soccer Federation. So we're going global rather than local, but the Dutch Soccer Federation put together a study based on 31, it's called Eredivisie. So excuse the colloquialism there, but that's essentially the Premier League in Holland. Over 31 games, they did a study of the effects of physical distancing, social distancing, if you will, throughout those 31 games. And some of the results in that study are quite favorable. I'm not sure it's the best document. I'm not sure it's a document that you could just hand off to somebody and say, well, this says that soccer's safe. But there's certainly information in there that would point to the fact that throughout a game of soccer, at the professional level, granted, but throughout the game of soccer, there is a 0% incidence of players coming into contact for longer than 30 seconds. So that is part of the argument, I would suggest, to go into your local public health and say, I've got all this great information on social distancing, and oh, by the way, soccer maybe isn't as scary as we originally thought. maybe it'll help, maybe it won't, but I certainly think that the most data we can gather from these places that are doing all this really, really excellent resource can only help us in our course to get soccer back sooner.
Dana's asked a great question about how Triple E might impact our season.
So, yeah, Dan, I see that there is Triple E, of course, is something that we have to deal with every year. They're expecting seeing a higher Triple E season this year. Yesterday, when the governor spoke, and we had actually put some information out about contacting our state reps to support a bill that the governor is trying to get passed. And we really, really hope that this bill gets passed, because if it does, this year will be one of the most aggressive Triple E treatment years on record. What they're trying to do is they're trying to not only spray, but to try and identify and go after where they believe the sources of mosquitoes breed, and kill them at the larvae stage. So if that passes and that takes place, we could actually have a moderate Triple E year. But then again, just like anything else, we play, and if our communities get hit by Triple E, then we have to abide by being off fields 30 minutes prior to sunset or sundown, and move forward from there. Not much, we can do to deal with it until we're confronted with that.
Next question, and we had a few questions regarding policing. If competition tournaments are allowed at a later date in MA, would we exclude MA teams or clubs that have played out of state?
So the answer is we would follow what the Department of Public Health asks us to do. That if they put out there that for basically it comes down to travel out of state, that if you're coming back in, and if you're coming back in from spending more than a night in any other state that is a high risk state, there could be a self-imposed quarantine of 14 days, or they could go the route of the way Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey went, was that it's mandatory 14-day quarantine from anybody that comes back from a state that has a 10% or higher infection rate. So we don't know what the governor may do on that, but right now we're on a voluntary self-imposed 14-day quarantine for travelers from out of state. No requirements.
We got a question from AJ regarding phase 3, step 1 encourages more stringent rules to accommodate athlete safety. Why would we not require masks for all levels of activity for all participants?
So I was previously asked this question. So back when we were talking about phase 2, before we entered phase 2, our committee started to talk about and the DPH started taking a look at requiring all participants, players and coaches, to wear masks while playing. And then the studies that came back at that time had the DPH very concerned that this would cause more respiratory damage to children than the protection and that the mask uses. So they've opted to go for the 6-foot distancing, and at this point. They were pretty adamant that, because we had talked as we were working on our phase 3 recommendations to wearing a mask, and they said they would, suggest masks for certain sports that do not have high respiratory, exertion. That, definitely lacrosse, soccer, hockey, are sports that they'd rather children not wear a mask and just socially distance until they give them permission to play games and be closer to each other. And a lot of studies have shown that there's more damage to wearing a mask while playing than there is actually playing, than not wearing.
Thank you. One which I think may be above our jurisdiction from Laurie regarding the Department of Education and children going back to school in cohorts or groups that they would be with for the same time. How would the youth soccer task force justify moving high-risk youth sports to level 3 play when this is likely to happen in education?
So, Laurie, that's a great question. Unfortunately, there are so many incongruous things that are taking place with sports, with education, with public gatherings, with restaurants, and going to the library and so on. It's just, I can't talk for the Department of Ed, and then what the state's task force will treat this. I can tell you this is that the Department of Public Health has hired, I believe, 2 full-time epidemiologists, which they didn't have before. They had consulting ones that are helping them to try and come up with their standards based on the numbers as they come up with our policies going forward. So it's a great question, and I wish I could tell you how they're thinking up there, but that's for them to figure out. We just have to work with the results as best possible.
Next question, I'm going to preface this by saying that we are going to push out some communication to clarify tomorrow on the numbers piece. But a question from Mike Sheedy: is it okay to train 7th/8th graders on a quarter of a field pitch as long as we keep their activities socially distanced?
7th and 8th graders on what type of field?
A quarter field pitch. So I'm assuming it would mean 4 groups of 7th or 8th graders.
The request from the state is that children play according to to a playing surface that's commensurate with their age group. Because baseball had asked about having because of shortage of fields and such, having a Babe Ruth team play on a short field that's used by 5 or like T-ball or 7th or 6th and 7th, 8 age kids, and they said no, it's got to be age appropriate. The playing surface needs to be age appropriate.
Question from Joanna: when are we expecting to present the proposed new form of soccer to state or governing bodies?
So we've got a pretty much close to a final draft put together. What we're waiting for is the right time to get it in front of the task force and make the pitch. Our advice that we got was to let this week go by, and then starting next week, early next week, is when we plan to try and get an audience. And we're going to try various different avenues to approach them with this concept, so that we can hopefully, when our step 2 takes place, we can be playing games.
There's no additional open questions at this time, so we'll stick around for 2 more minutes to see if any more come through.
Okay. I see. I'll answer there. Mike Sheedy. Even if there are only 12 or 13 players, they need to train on an 11v11 field. What about if it's a clinic format? That essentially, Mike, what it comes down to is that the reason why they've come up with these rules is that they believe if the children are playing on an age-specific field, that their concern is that people will try and crowd way too many people onto a surface that far exceeds what the expectations would be. For example, having 4 high school teams, age group teams, playing on 7v7 fields, trying to manage that and keep them socially distanced in that confined space is very, very difficult. And so that's what they come with. Now, state, even if it's a clinic format, if they're just using a quarter of the field and remaining socially distanced, that's fine. You just can't have any others on that field. You can have up to 25 on, in that group, but you can't have, 4 groups of 25. There's a little comment here from somebody about the COVID officer. I haven't seen anything. It's because we're still collecting the names of all the COVID officers. We're going to start to put that together. Unfortunately, it's been a little tough. We have not been back in our office. I'm the only one that's been in there. Rob's been in to pick up some stuff, but is to try and start coordinating an internal employee at Masters Soccer who will then be that communication person with the COVID officers. But at this time, I think our COVID officers understand what their job is. You've got everything right here on this website that you're looking at, and that's your job, is to get that, make sure everybody understands it, reads it, hold Zoom chats with all of your coaches, go through it with them. Use that as an opportunity to connect with your parents and coaches as well. So, thank you, Sean. We appreciate that. Is that pretty much it, Rob?
I think we're good.
All
just
right.
to finish up, we will be posting this recording online as well as the slides. If you've got any questions, then please don't hesitate to reach out to us individually as well.
So everybody, thank you very much for being on tonight. We appreciate it. We've lost a few of you, but we really appreciate everything that you're doing. Your efforts are Ian applauded your efforts. I applaud your efforts. You are so important to us. We know this is not what we asked for. Believe me, at all, but it's what we have to deal with, and we're going to make the best of it. I can share with you, I'm not sitting by quietly. If those people who know me know I can't do that. Thanks, Ian. I am advocating on your behalf. We've got to get the kids out there and playing games. My concern is that if we can't get the kids out there, let's get them out this summer right now, clinics and kicking a ball, that we're going to start to lose the numbers. Kids are going to start to say, listen, I don't want to play anymore. Parents are going to say, you don't have to play anymore. The soccer numbers, there's studies that are taking place in the last 3 years that soccer numbers are starting to go up in the country. And we've got to keep it on that rise. And I really believe that collectively we can all work with each other to go in the right direction. I also believe that we've got some incredible people teaching our children how to play the game at all levels, all the way from a U5 kickers up to academy level. We've got some incredible people in the state doing some incredible things, and we thank you. But let's not, to use a term, screw the pooch. Let's not. No, it's from the NASA, Ian. Let's not ruin things by having one of our coaches go out there and forget about this stuff. Because I can tell you this, and I've called some people, I'm getting crazy stuff, photos, videos, Facebook postings of people that are violating every guideline, and we can't afford that. That doesn't help us out collectively. So let's help each other out. Let's keep things going in the right direction. If you see somebody doing something wrong, call somebody up. Call me up. I have no problem making phone calls to address the issue, because we've got to move forward. I do not want to be in one of those states where they say, sorry, backwards. And that's not, we can't afford that, and we don't want that to happen. So let's all work together. Let's get through this. Let the kids, get them out there kicking the ball, be happy, and the results are going to be phenomenal. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate everything you're doing.